Karen Matthews. That's a name I'll be trying to forget for the rest of my life. I'm Roger Turner, and I was married to Karen for 20 years. Like most ignorant husbands, I thought we had a good marriage until I found out otherwise. Karen and I were two working-class kids from the municipal area. We went to the same school, although we had different groups of friends. We knew each other, but didn't start dating until a few years after school. At the time, Karen was a lawyer's secretary, and I was just starting my own business. My business was websites, specifically design and hosting. The big money came from two comparison sites I developed, one for insurance, the other for price checking. When Karen and I got married, I was already worth a fair amount, and to protect my business, my lawyer suggested a prenuptial agreement. It stated that if the marriage ended for any reason, Karen would receive a percentage of my personal estate, and thinking we'd be together for life, I happily signed it. Karen signed it, knowing that no matter what happened, she'd be wealthy. Although our careers were different, we were good at one thing: in bed. Karen was like an insatiable beast. Throughout our entire marriage, Karen fucked me to death 4 times a week, no less. Our eldest son was born 19 months after the wedding, and 4 years later, twins were born. Now I was the father of 3 boys. The only thing we disagreed on was names. For some reason, Karen wanted to use names with biblical undertones. Since we weren't religious, I didn't see the point in that. We agreed on the name Robert for the eldest child, and 4 years later, we named the twins Ethan and Luke. Despite both of us working, we always found time on weekends to spend together as a family. We had a nice family home in a good area. Most of our neighbors were businessmen and a few minor celebrities. We were constantly invited to parties or business events, but we often declined the invitations to spend time with the kids. My business grew to the point where I had 40 employees. Don Hill was my executive director and second in command. The rest of the staff were either technical specialists or financial workers. As any employer knows, good employees are hard to find these days, let alone keep. For this reason, I was always looking for incentives to retain my employees. Every year on their birthdays, I gave them a day off with pay, plus paid for lunch for the employee and their spouse or partner. I decided to offer all employees a private healthcare package, the advantage of which was that they could receive urgent treatment without queuing in the NHS, National Health Service of England. Since the package included immediate family members, most employees appreciated this gesture. As part of the healthcare package, there was a health check every 2 years. With a month left until my 45th birthday, I received an invitation for a medical examination. Thinking I would set a good example for my employees, I agreed to it. The doctor asked me a few questions about my lifestyle. Did I smoke? Did I drink? Standard questions one might expect. He conducted all the usual checks, such as measuring height, weight, and blood pressure. To complete the tests, I was asked to provide blood and urine samples. The doctor explained that they would conduct the tests, and if any issues arose, they would contact me. I returned to work, knowing I looked healthy and fit. In the evening, Karen and I talked about our son Robert's upcoming 18th birthday. We decided to throw him a party, and after some deliberation, we settled on a venue. We both agreed that we didn't want drunk 18-year-olds roaming around our house. 2 days before the party, I received news that turned my life upside down. The doctor wanted to talk to me about the results of my tests. "Is it bad news, Doc?" I asked, taking a seat where the doctor indicated. "It's not life-threatening, Mr. Turner. The issue is that you seem to have hemochromatosis. Since you lead a relatively healthy lifestyle, you don't have any obvious symptoms. With some medication, we can help control the condition." "Any idea how I got it?" I asked. "I'm afraid it's a hereditary condition, Mr. Turner. Symptoms vary in each known case. Some men suffer from chronic internal pain, others live without pain but are infertile. You belong to the latter group." "Hereditary. I'd better get my sons checked." "Doc, did you just say I'm infertile?" "Yes, Mr. Turner. The test results indicate that you are sterile, and based on our experience, I would say you have always been sterile." From the expression on his face, I understood what he was thinking. The doctor told me about the medications he prescribed. Fortunately, he gave me a few pamphlets to read, but I was still shaken, so I heard little of what he was telling me. I had planned to return to the office by the end of the day, but instead, I headed home. While Karen was at work and the boys were at school, I had time to think. Setting aside self-pity, I scheduled urgent testing for the boys. If they weren't my sons, I wanted answers from my wife. During dinner that evening, I explained what I had learned today, and the boys were fine with getting tested. Karen was not as enthusiastic, and considering that the boys' health was the primary concern, I couldn't understand her position. Regardless of how Karen felt, 2 days after the party, I took the boys for testing. It was a painful few days waiting for the results. When I received the results, my emotions were mixed. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Turner." The doctor indicated a chair. "What's wrong with me?" I asked, knowing that everything was clear with the boys. "We found it odd that after extensive testing, none of your sons showed any signs of hemochromatosis. Since we still had your samples, I asked the lab to conduct a DNA test. I hope you don't mind. I noticed your concern at our last meeting." I looked at the doctor, knowing that it would be bad news. "I'm afraid the tests showed that you are not the biological father of your sons." I jumped up, claiming that the test results were incorrect. The doctor allowed me to rant for a few minutes before I calmed down and sat back down. "Do all the boys have the same father?" I asked. "Yes. The test confirmed that the father of all 3 boys was the same man. Since you weren't aware of your condition, I assume your wife wasn't either?" "My wife didn't know. She still doesn't know the whole story. I told her about health issues, but I didn't mention that I was infertile. I held on to hope that the boys would be mine." "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner." I nodded. "Could you provide me with a printed copy of the DNA results? I have a feeling I'll need them very soon." I thanked the doctor and left. Normally, I might have thought about going home, but today I decided to return to the office. As soon as I entered the office, Don realized something was wrong. He followed me into my office and closed the door. "What's wrong, Roger?" "You look like death," Don said. "I have bad news, Don." I sat down and explained everything to Don. "Good Lord, Roger. What are you going to do about this?" Don asked. "As I see it, I have 2 options. I can say nothing and continue to play the clueless, ignorant husband, or I can confront Karen. The latter will likely lead to a divorce," I replied. 20 years. 20 damn years I've lived in deception. All this time I thought the boys were mine. "Calm down, Roger. I'm sure there's an explanation for this." "Oh, I'm sure there is, Don. Maybe Karen will explain it to me tonight. I'll leave you in charge for a few days. I need to sort out this mess."
I'm sorry, Roger.
"Take as much time as you need. I'll get in touch with you if there's something I can't handle." Don returned to his office, and I sat there, pondering how to deal with this mess. Mentally, I estimated that Karen would receive around £2 million if we divorced. Considering I was worth 10 times more, I could afford it. I called my lawyer for advice. Since he mostly dealt with corporate clients, he recommended Arthur Crenshaw. Arthur Crenshaw was an old-school lawyer who knew the ins and outs of the legal system. "Are you sure this is what you want to do, Mr. Turner?" "Yes. My wife won't be able to say anything to fix the situation. Can I pick up the papers when they're ready?" "Of course. I'll be in court tomorrow. My secretary Marion will bring them to you." I thanked Arthur and left. I drove around the neighborhood until it was time to go home. When I entered the house, the twins were watching TV and Karen was cooking dinner. "Where's Robert?" I asked. "He's staying over at a friend's tonight. It's just the 4 of us for dinner tonight," Karen smiled. I wondered if she would still be smiling later, after our little conversation. After dinner, the twins went to their rooms. Loading the dishwasher, I joined Karen in the living room. I had an interesting conversation with the doctor. "Really? About what?" Karen responded calmly. "It was about how the boys show no signs of the hereditary condition I have. After all the tests, they found nothing, which seems very unusual. They solved the puzzle when the doctor conducted the DNA test. The boys' DNA doesn't match mine, and I wondered if you could explain." Karen sat silently and looked at me for a minute. "I have nothing to say. The boys aren't yours. I fell in love with someone else shortly after our wedding. My love was so strong that I wanted his children. When we were trying to conceive a child, I used a diaphragm until I was with him, Karen replied, almost emotionless. If you fell in love with someone else, why didn't you divorce me and go play happy families with him? Because he was already married and had children. Now that we know you're infertile, it seems like I made the right decision. If not for this, we would never have become parents. I can't believe I'm hearing this. You got pregnant by another man because you fell in love with him. That means we've been living a lie for 20 years. I still love you, Roger. I just loved another man more. I see. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had children with him. I'm going away for a while. I can't be around you right now. Tonight, I'll sleep in the spare room. Storming out of the house, I hurried away. After a few drinks at the pub, I returned home. Karen was sitting and watching TV. I ignored her and headed to the spare room. Pretending to be asleep, about 30 minutes later, she knocked on the door. In the morning, I showered, dressed, and left the house without saying a word. Sometime later, Karen sent me a message. Are you okay? What do you think? I replied. Karen didn't respond. I met with Dawn, then spent the morning looking for a house to buy. Later that same day, I picked up the divorce papers. When I pulled up to the house, Karen was alone. She smiled when I entered. Where are the boys? I asked sharply. Robert is out again, and the twins are with my parents. Since we need to talk, I thought it would be better if the boys weren't here. I'm glad you assumed I'd come back home, although I'm not quite sure what, in your opinion, we should talk about. I'll go upstairs and change, and while I do that, you can take a look at this. Tossing the envelope onto the kitchen table, I left. Karen stood with folded arms and a defiant expression when I returned to the kitchen. So, Roger, divorce? Yes, Karen, divorce. Last night you told me you love another man more than me. You loved him so much you even bore his damn children. But I still love you, Roger. Yes, sure, but not enough to have my children. The fact that I'm infertile doesn't change anything. If we'd known back then, we could have adopted. You left and got pregnant by that bastard, not giving me a say. As far as I know, you're still screwing him. Divorce is the only way out for me, Karen. As you can see, I was fair. You'll get £2 million according to the prenuptial agreement. When I mentioned that Karen was still sleeping with him, she looked at the floor, and that told me everything I wanted to know. This is my house, Karen, so you need to move out. Find a place, and I'll pay for it. We'll deduct it from your £2 million. Meanwhile, I'll stay in a hotel. What about child support? Karen almost shouted. Since Robert is already over 18, it doesn't matter. If you need child support for the twins, ask their father, whoever he may be. You're making a big mistake, Roger. You're listed as the boy's father, so you have to pay for them. I made a mistake marrying you, Karen. Just out of curiosity, who was the boy's father? I won't tell you. It won't change anything anyway. You're still going through with the divorce. Then I went back upstairs to pack my clothes. I was planning to stay in a hotel for a few nights until I sorted things out. Karen was sitting at the table, crying, as I carried the suitcases downstairs. I'll come back for my things in a day or two. That should be enough for a few days, I said, not waiting for a response. I found an apartment I could rent for 2 months, hoping that would be all I needed it for. It also gave Karen a chance to find accommodation. Karen called me several times, asking me to reconsider, but after the last call, which was very tense, she gave up. My lawyer said she signed and returned the divorce papers. I gave her a month to vacate the house. Robert called to tell me he was unhappy with his mother. He asked if he could move in with me once I found a place. I told Robert that in that case, it would be the other way around, and his mother would be moving out of the house. When I called to speak with Ethan and Luke, I was told they didn't want to talk to me. I heard Luke shouting that he hated me. One evening, while talking with Robert, Karen called him. He put her on speaker. Yeah, what do you need? Robert said sharply. Robert, don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. Show some respect. Respect? That's fucking funny. Robert paused and stared at the phone. You brought this on yourself. You destroyed this family. I want nothing to do with you, or the sperm donor you call my father. Stay away from me and don't call me again. You're nothing but a wicked witch. Robert pressed the button to end the call. You should try to maintain some relationship with your mother, I advised. She can go to hell, Dad. I don't want anything to do with her. I hope the twins will understand what a wicked person she is and leave when they're old enough. Karen found a home for herself and the twins. She left a room for Robert. Not that he planned on using it. I was there the day she moved out. Take the bed, Karen. I'll buy a new one. We never did anything in this house. I don't believe a word you say, so take the bed. The twins ignored me the whole time we were in the house. They didn't even look back when Karen left. Thanks to my wealth and the status of a regular guy who achieved good results, the newspapers followed the divorce story. Public opinion was on my side. Most people thought Karen treated me poorly. 5 months later, the divorce was final. Unfortunately, I had to pay child support for the twins. Roger, it's Arthur. Just calling to let you know you're a single man. The divorce became final today. Thanks, Arthur. I have a few questions for you. Can I contest the child support order, and can I get my name removed from the twins' birth certificates? You can challenge the child support claim, although it may take some time. The biological father will have to undergo a paternity test before anything happens. He'll likely try to avoid the test at all costs. There's another way. It'll be a bit more expensive, but the result will be achieved faster. And what's the alternative? I asked. You can sue your ex-wife for parental fraud. This would mean that you'll be removed from the birth certificates, and you can reclaim all the child support you've paid since the divorce. If I subpoena her to court, I'll ask her to name the father. She won't be able to refuse to answer while under oath. That way, you can sue him for overdue child support. Let's do it, Arthur. Prepare the papers and file them, please. Will do, Roger. I'll let you know when Karen receives them. 3 days later, I was informed that Karen was served with documents regarding parental fraud. I expected a call from Karen. Her silence somewhat worried me. Arthur called me and said Karen's lawyer wants to schedule a meeting. I told him to tell them I'm not interested, and we'll see them in court. On the day of the hearing, I sat with Arthur. Karen sat with her lawyer. She looked concerned. I guessed her lawyer was someone from the law firm where she works. The hearing started with me explaining why I'm suing Karen. I was questioned by Karen's lawyer as well as Arthur. After lunch, Karen faced the lawyers. Her lawyer was gentler with her. Arthur wasn't as lenient. Miss Matthews, your ex-husband is suing you for parental fraud. At the recent divorce hearing, you admitted that my client is not the father of your 3 sons. My client wants his name removed from the birth certificates and replaced with the biological father's name. Could you tell us who the real father is? Karen sat silently, staring at the floor. I can't. It would ruin his family and his life, Karen replied. Just like you destroyed mine, I thought to myself. The judge's voice brought me back to reality. Miss Matthews, may I remind you that you are under oath? Please answer the question. Karen sat and stared straight ahead. She answered in a quiet voice, almost a whisper. Speak up, Miss Matthews, the judge admonished Karen. Lawrence Rosenthal, Karen replied, then stared at the floor again. The young woman stood behind me and left the courtroom. Arthur addressed the judge. Your Honor, Miss Matthews has named the biological father of her children. All my client wants is to have his name removed from the birth certificates. Arthur returned and sat next to me. The judge looked down at some papers. I have concluded that Miss Matthews deceived her former husband, leading him to believe he was the father of 3 children, although it is clearly not the case. Miss Matthews, I sentence you to 6 months of imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. If you appear in court for any offense during this time, these 6 months will be added to any sentence imposed. Do you understand? Karen responded affirmatively. Turning to me, the judge pronounced, Mr. Turner, by the court's decision, your name will be removed from the birth certificates of Miss Matthews' children. Since it has been proven that you are not the father, I relieve you of any financial obligations regarding child support. Thank you, Your Honor, I replied. We stood as the judge left the courtroom. Arthur gathered his papers, and we exited the courtroom. Karen approached us in the foyer. Hope you're satisfied, Roger. You've likely ruined a man's life, not to mention his marriage. With your money, you could have afforded to pay child support for a few more years. If you don't mind, I need to speak to Larry and tell him what happened. I hope I never see you again or have to talk to you, Roger. Arthur spoke up. Miss Matthews, I'm not sure what you intend to say to Mr. Rosenthal. I think it's only fair to warn you that 10 minutes ago, he was served with documents for child support. Have a good day. Arthur and I walked away, leaving Karen crying. How did you manage to serve Rosenthal so quickly? I asked Arthur. Marion prepared the documents. We just needed his name. When Karen mentioned who it was, my assistant left the courtroom to call Marion. She printed the papers and handed them to the waiting process server. Mr. Rosenthal was notified even before the hearing ended. Arthur smiled. The attorney told me that Rosenthal fainted when he opened the envelope. He was taken away in an ambulance when Karen entered the office. Just like with my divorce, all the newspapers were on it. Larry Rosenthal became famous when the newspapers hit the stores the next day. It was through the media that I found out what had happened. When the senior partners found out what caused Rosenthal's downfall, they worsened his situation and fired him. His relationship with Karen contradicted the company's policies. Karen was also fired. My case against Rosenthal ran its course. His wife cleared him during the messy divorce. The court made a note in his personal file that he owed me £450,000, but I didn't expect to see a penny of it. Money wasn't a problem for me. I just wanted to ruin his life as he had ruined mine. True to her word, Karen hasn't spoken to me since that day in court. Larry moved in with Karen when he was kicked out by his wife, and as far as I know, they're still together. Robert lives with me. He still refuses to acknowledge his mother and biological father. Nowadays, I divide my time between business and friends. I have a few friends with benefits, but none of them are serious, as I have no intention of getting married again. 20 years of living a lie was more than enough for me.